Hey everyone, welcome back to the Five Pines podcast. I'm your host, Jamie A.B. So today we're going to talk about DEI. Okay, we got all these celebrities fear-mongering at the Grammys, and we need to talk about it, okay? So as somebody who literally used to advocate for DEI initiatives and programs until I kind of realized that these are the programs that only look good on paper, rather than actually helping people in real life, okay? We need to desperately talk about this because obviously when they name a program, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, when they say that that's the program, it looks horrible if you say that you don't believe in it, okay? Because people are like, you don't believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion? Well, I believe in those things all separately because we were already doing those things, but altogether as this program, no, I do not believe in it, and here's why. First of all, I truly believe that climate change initiatives and the DEI programs are what's ruining our entire social systems as a whole. Because we're not following the ethics of moral standards of principles or whatever it is, basically because we're not following the standard code of ethics, that's what it's called, and instead turning to DEI, we are forgetting things like do no harm, bodily autonomy, things like that, okay? Not doing things beyond your scope. So what that kind of looks like is, to me, when people justify being able to keep things from parents, okay? One of my first red flags with DEI programs was when you're working in the schools as an education worker or a teacher, those PD days are professional development days. And despite us desperately needing those to put together programs for our students and getting our poop in a group because we don't get prep time like teachers do, they would make us go to these courses, okay? And one time we went to this course, and honestly, a lot of them were just normal, informative courses, and they were pretty great. But then it started getting pretty weird, okay? First, the most abnormal one that we first seen was in 2019. And it was basically telling us that if a homeless person comes up to you and steals from you, let it happen. You should feel bad for them because they're stealing from you and their life is so hard and all of this stuff. And we were like, excuse me? I'm sorry, no, that does not make any sense whatsoever. And then the school systems started to change. Now, on paper, it looks like they're following the indigenous, basically, Kathleen Wynne and the indigenous people came up with this incredible, by the way to enforce consequences on children, okay? They don't follow that. They're following diversity, equity, and inclusion now, all right? Because this is why you have so many staff members leaving education. Because kids are allowed to beat the shit out of EAs. That's why it's the most dangerous place to work in Ontario. Tell me why it's the most violent place to work in Ontario and it's a union-led place. Tell me that. They know that kids are allowed to get away with whatever they want, and there's essentially no consequences for children anymore because exactly like our bail system, they use the excuse of, well, they could have had a hard life, they could have had a hard day, they have mental illness. Okay, I have mental illness and you don't see me on the streets hurting people and using my mental illness as an excuse to do that, do you? No, that's what the bail system is also based off of, is this idea that these criminals deserve a second chance. It's not a second chance. It's a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. In the school system, they dead ass have behavioral specialists, and the behavioral specialist will tell you, when your kid gets home, if they've had a really rough day at school, rough day beating the shit out of people, you need to start fresh and not talk about it. No. I literally could have a stroke when I hear behavioral management people say that. What do you mean? No, the best thing that's ever worked is having consequences at home, getting that break from that video game. If you're going to treat people in real life this way, there's going to be consequences. I understand that mental illness is in play, but using mental illness as an excuse to get away with stuff rather than teaching these children with mental illness how to move in their day safely, and give them the coping mechanisms. I digress. Basically, our schools have become inclusion without support is abandonment, and that's basically what you need to know. Is that on paper, this looks great. All of the kids with disabilities are in the classroom, and there's EAs and everything's great, when in reality the best thing that would work is not going back to the 90s where we don't know these children at all. Absolutely not. That's not what I want. I want what they do in the high schools, where they have this class where they feel very safe, and then they get to go to like art classes or gym or math, wherever they thrive. Go to the setting with their peers where they thrive, when it's math time or whatever. I only started thinking this after the Panini Press, and I was actually working in the schools with my student with disabilities and other students with their EAs and with disabilities. And my students and every other student barely had any set off. They were barely upset because they were in an environment where they felt encouraged, and they felt, like they were around people who they could talk to, and they felt so comfortable being around. I found that in the classrooms are too overwhelming for these students. They cannot handle the noise, and I do not blame them. They shouldn't even have to put those things on their heads to be able to have quiet time. Like, it's honestly, the concept of it was great at first, but it's just snowballed into this kids can do whatever they want to do, and abuse happens at the schools, and it doesn't matter, and we can't tell anybody about it. And it's literally to the point where we are losing so much education staff that nobody wants to work in the schools at all. And I'm not joking. We literally, before I left the schools because of my injury, and to have an injury and do that job, it's just impossible. They were telling us that they were about to have people who were not even trained as either CYWs. You can do a couple of different things to be an EA, but they had absolutely no training and had no idea. Because it was one thing that we were getting like dentists. Dentists couldn't find jobs, and they were coming in and substituting as teachers. And that's one thing, to be a teacher, but to have to deal with a student with severe disabilities, and where these students are as big as you and they can literally unalive you, as we seen the other day. Now, before I go into my real example of DEI, I just want to say that this is something I heard at work when I was working in the schools, and it may or may not be true, but we heard that the less suspensions you have on your record, the more likely you are to be promoted at the board. But my final example, I guess, of really not liking DEI, and this is going back to when I was actually on the left, was when it was COVID. Okay, remember how they sent us home in March, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We didn't go back to school/work till September 2020. Okay, so September 2020 comes. Remember, they didn't start kids till 3 weeks in to prepare the school. Okay, what do you think we did in those days to prepare the school? Do you think that we learned about BLM? Because that's what we did. We learned how we were racist from birth and all of these different absurd things. Racist from birth, and that all of these things were our fault, and especially because I was at a Catholic school. Woo! And even then, okay, we had a white woman come on the screen and tell us about anti-racism. Huh? What? It did not sit well. I was in a very conservative Catholic, like none of them believed in BLM or anything. So it was a nightmare. Okay, it was a full-blown nightmare. And I couldn't believe that there was nothing in place for COVID protocols whatsoever. We were being told, like, I had coworkers that had to wear the same gown covered in germs, like a paper gown, all week to do changes because they made them wear it but wouldn't give them even a new one per day. Yeah, but we were doing training on how we were racist. Tell me how that fucking makes sense. Tell me how that makes sense. And the stuff that we went through in those schools, I can't even talk about it. The things that they wanted us to implement on the kids, and just, the thing is that you're going to have teachers. None of this is part of the curriculum. That's what's so fucked up about it, is that you're going to have these PD days, okay? And then you're going to have really young teachers who take all this information in and implement it in their classrooms. And then you have the older teachers who are not going to implement it at all. Some younger teachers don't implement it. Some of the older teachers do implement it. It really just depends on who your children's teacher is. I'm not going to sit here and scare the crap out of you guys, but things are happening in our schools, okay? And that's just the school system. I'm sure DEI is existing in every other thing, because the more we find out it's at the bank. The more we find out it's this. And DEI initiatives and programs essentially give the illusion that these companies are helping, but while they literally do nothing to help in the slightest, okay? I will always go back to the Pride example, the Pride sidewalk. I used to think they were cute. I genuinely did. When people are starving, when people can't afford to live, we should not be worrying about rainbow crosswalks. I'm sorry. The sidewalk that the rainbow leads to isn't even accessible for people with disabilities. But we're painting this? This has got to stop, you guys. Because here's the thing. I thought all of this was great. I thought it was great in the beginning because, yes, we should be helping minorities. The thing is, it's, first of all, for some reason, only centered around the LGBTQ plus community, okay? Why are we only celebrating the LGBTQ plus community? Why are we not doing this much for people with disabilities? Has anybody ever thought about the children who don't want a spotlight on them because of their sexuality for a month at a time? Have you guys ever thought about that? Like, have we ever thought about the other? I know everybody thinks because it's painted in the media as this great thing, but like, have you ever considered that these children don't want that? I'm just wondering that it ostracizes them, because it does. My final nail in the coffin for DEI and completely not believing in it anymore was when I was filling out a grant from the government for my photography business, and I had to put money into this to fill this out or whatever. And I put this massive essay on why I was doing this, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the essay, after I wrote everything that I could, they asked me what my sexual orientation was. Now, I'm bisexual myself, okay? I am not on here. It's not my personality or anything, but I literally was so offended, because what does that have to do with my skills in photography? What does that have to do with running my business? You should not be giving me something because of my sexuality, okay? Because that's where I moved into where we should be. This is where I'm going to talk about like what we need to replace it with, which is the code of ethics, okay? Because it genuinely covered equity that led to equality. And that's not what diversity, equity, and inclusion has been, nor will it ever. It has been used as a tool to divide us, to make people legitimately racist towards white people, okay? Because I promise you guys, I've done my research when it comes to what the Canadian government has done to Indigenous people. And because I was genuinely convinced that I was to blame for that. And I am not to blame for that. My family's not even to blame for that. Because just like right now, my family had no clue when they were brought over here or came over here for a better life what the government was doing to Indigenous people. They had no idea, you guys. And the government wants us to fall for their sins. They want us to blame ourselves so that we feel guilty for something we did not participate in, so that we don't notice that they are continuing to repeat history now. Okay? They did a great job at blaming literally the church, and I put blame on the church. The church was the Catholic Church was kind of like the original government, but I digress. The church and the government are to blame for what happened in those schools. Go back and read Justin Trudeau's dad's, Pierre Trudeau's, like, overview on them. Go read Jean Chrétien's overview on them. It's despicable. It's disgusting. One of the things that stood out to me the most that made me kind of open my eyes was when they said that the reason they were putting Indigenous people into reservations and making their kids go to residential school was because they were born savages. Government's words, not mine. It is important that we know these words and what they actually said about Indigenous people, because we can turn around and reflect on how they treat white people. Now, DEI programs push the idea that white people are inherently racist from birth, that we are violent from birth, and that we can't help it. We are just this from birth, okay? That, to me, sounds exactly like the rhetoric that they used to use as an excuse to put Indigenous people in reservations and take their children and, take the culture out of their children, okay? See, but the thing is that we already had equity in this country, and our equity equaled equality, if that makes sense. So throughout school, after I was diagnosed, I guess, I got extra help for having ADHD and multiple learning disabilities, okay? I went on to college and I had extra help. I got a lot of help when it came to handling time management and stuff like that, so that when I did go and get my job, okay, I didn't need to any longer have those supports because I had used them for so long. I had developed my own strategies, and I was finally in a place where, yes, I'm ready to have a full-time job. I can get there on time. Here are my strategies. I'm going to wake up this early, be able to do this, this, and this. And I did not have to use any diversity, equity, inclusion to get my job. Do you see what I'm saying? So when, and the thing is that we already have those programs, okay? If you're disabled, there, I'm not saying it's the best in the world, but there is funding for people with disabilities, okay? The Liberals in Ontario shut down all of the psychiatric hospitals and literally left these people abandoned, okay? Because when we have inclusion without support, it leads to abandonment, okay? The entire idea of the system before in Canada, the best way I could describe it is that people with disabilities were empowered to find their best way and their best outcomes in how to best thrive in Canada as a person with disabilities, okay? And the best way I could describe it now is that they want people to be in this state of perpetual victim. Well, you can't do this because of all of the obstacles that are in your life. No, that's not how this works. And it almost feels to me that we have gone completely backwards when it comes to this, because tell me why, if you were trans, you would be okay of being a quota and your boss getting a check for hiring you just because you're trans. Like, does that make sense to you guys? Does it make sense to you that these people get a check for hiring you if you're gay or a certain skin color? No, before in Canada, you literally weren't even allowed to ask people what their skin color was on a resume at all, okay? We need to go back to equality, okay? We had equity within our equality, if that makes sense. And we have those programs to help people when they're down on their hard times or they've gone through stuff. But it doesn't help now that those systems that are supposed to be helping people just enable behavior, okay? You can't you can't tell a kid that they can change and not give them consequences for their behavior. They're not ever going to change, okay? We are literally Pavloving an entire generation into behaving horribly. I used to say, well, these kids can't go out and destroy a grocery store and get away with it and just be cheered on. So why are we allowing them to do that in class? But you are. You're allowed to literally unalive your wife and pretty much get away with it in Canada. You can, as long as the person doesn't even actually die. You can get away with a lot. It's sick, it's twisted, and it's led to a lot of dangerous habits. It's led to this harm reduction, and I'm going to talk about harm reduction in a whole other video, but it's led to harm reduction being completely unrecognizable because this harm reduction is not reducing harm. If anything, we have seen the numbers go up. Almost half of Canadians died from drug poisoning last year. So tell me where this is working, okay? So when you hear these celebrities and they're like, diversity, equity, inclusion is important, they're talking about this weird program. They're not actually talking about actual inclusion, actual diversity. You know what I mean? Like, these people, time and time again, companies, celebrities, and, all of these heads of these corporations, they put a lot of money into looking good and using DEI initiatives to make themselves seem good, but they're not, okay? And the fact that these people get paid, and in some circumstances, it's, I used to work at Goodwill, and they get, there's a program there where they get subsidized, like they hire criminals to come and clean the stores after it's closed. And I can respect that because genuinely you are taking on a massive risk when you're hiring full-blown criminals to come and clean your store. But we should not be giving out the message that, you're a risk, you're all of these. No, guys. Hiring someone who's gay? Are you serious? Like, why should our boss know that about us? What do you mean? Like, no, let's go back to just being, like, you could always tell if someone was gay. It's not like they had to hide it before in stores and stuff. Like, do we also need to, on the flip side, turn around and have a spotlight on the gays every year for a whole month? Is this what everybody wants? Does this seem like it's putting out great results? I don't think so. We need to go back to hiring people because of their smarts and their capabilities rather than them being a quota, okay? We need to have equity to equal equality, okay? That's why social programs definitely can work if the incentive is that you're, when I went to school with my daughter, I got lots of grants and loans to be able to complete school, and it ended up working out for me. Ironically, I now don't work because I was, biohazarded twice. But that's the idea, is that when people are down on hard times, they were able to get back up onto their feet, okay? These people act like we didn't have anti-discrimination laws already set in place, okay? DEI is pushed by the WEF, okay? And it's here on purpose to divide us, to make you think that your fellow Canadian who is white is out to get you, to make white people feel guilty about things that they had no participation in, okay? Because if we actually cared about white supremacy, why would the Liberals continue to have a nepo, why would you continue to hire the epitome of white privilege if you guys think it's so real and you're so against it? It's BS. It's not real. We need to go back to equality, okay? There was representation in all of these different things. I don't know where you guys were, but I grew up watching fucking Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, That's a Raven. I never even thought about them having a different skin color. Not once. Why? Because we were raised in an environment where we were taught that if your skin color was different, it was because you have ancestors or you are from a different part of the world, and the closer that you get to the equator, the darker your skin will be. And after that, we didn't really think about it. Okay? Even as somebody who grew up in Southern Ontario, rural Southern Ontario, very conservative town, I grew up around kids who were gay, kids who were Black, Asian, all of the different things, okay? Not once did I think I was racist until the government said tried to convince me I was racist in my 20s, okay? This is not about people being hateful. This is about people noticing that this is causing a problem. This is causing more division, and this is not working, and we need to get back to actually investing in what we need to help people get better. because these programs that look good on paper and then when you apply them are actually very not helpful are doing nothing but destroying our society. So I'll make another DEI video because I do want to showcase some pretty horrendous examples of DEI and just how far people have taken it. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think it's a good thing? Do you guys think it's a bad thing? I obviously do not think it's a good thing, but let me know in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and have a great day, guys.